Welcome again to You Made That, the podcast about makers, making, and the things that we make. And no, it is not reclaimed audio. Nice throwback to Bob there. And we're doing something special this week. We're having a guest in for an interview. We will be talking with Mr. Eli Polite. For those of you not familiar with Eli's work, I highly recommend that you go jump on YouTube right now and watch his videos on segmenting. They will blow your mind away.
They might break your mind.
just
they did mine.
So with me, as you can hear, with me, as always, are the delightful Bob Blanford and Rebecca DeGroot.
Hi.
See what I did there? I reversed it.
I like that. Yeah.
You switched it up on us.
Man. Finally, I got my due, right? I was due.
I know.
Yeah.
And you only get one of those, so
Only
sorry. That's So what's everybody been up to this week? Let's start with our guest, Eli. Eli, what have you been working on?
It's been a long week. So far this week, I have worked on 4 salt and pepper shakers. I have started a set of urns for a friend of mine who has 2 aging dogs that probably won't be with us very much longer. And aside from that, I have been working on getting the wiring done for my new shop, which is going to be finalized Monday. So it's been a really long week.
Now, the wiring's going to be finalized, or the shop's going to be finalized?
The wiring. I built the shop last summer, and I had to get the wiring done. So when it came time to do the wiring, I was expecting it to be a lot easier than it actually was. It took about 2 months to get the my electric company to come out to send an engineer out to look at it, because my electric running to the house, I only had a 100 amp breaker box, which was not enough to run a shop that has 3-phase. My house doesn't even have, not 3-phase, but 220. My house didn't even have 220 in it.
Oh, Lord.
Because all of my appliances are gas. My dryer, hot water heater, everything is gas. And my house is 105 years old. And the electricity had never been updated since like 1960 something.
So you had the screw-in fuses?
No, the electric box had the breaker box had been updated in 75, I think.
Okay.
So it has the flip switches, but it's really old. So I had to have the service to the house upgraded, which took about 2 months. And then it was too cold to have the breaker box updated, because I have to have the electric off for a full 8 hours for them to do it. And it's been snowing and all that, so it's just been, the electric's been my bottleneck. As soon as this is done, I can finish my shop, and then I've got my new home shop, and I'm ready to roll.
Nice.
I thought Rebecca was going to start playing the violin when you talked about 8 hours with no electricity after what she just went through a couple weeks ago.
It's funny, because I actually lived in San Antonio in the 80s, and we had the same thing happen.
Oh, gosh.
In the mid-'80s, we had 8 inches of snow with about 3/4 of an inch of ice on top of it, and everything was shut down.
Wow.
So that was mid to late 80s, so I guess it happens there every 20 or 30 years. I don't know.
That's crazy.
It's like Texas never learns the lesson. Because
No.
this will never happen again. This is Texas. And 10 years later, it happens again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, lucky for us, that only happens about every 6 months here, right, Michael?
Yeah. Yeah, but
it's like I see like 6 inches of snow in Texas. I'm like, that's a Wednesday for us in December.
and we do nice things to our electrical grid around here, like winterize them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big
that
thing.
That seems like the smart thing to do.
You'd think, but hey, who am I? I'm just a Hoosier. What do I know? And Rebecca, what have you been up to?
Well, it's spring break. Yay! So,
Is it starting or ending?
It's starting. It's starting.
Okay.
So
okay.
my list for next week will be much longer of what I've done. I'm hoping. Fingers crossed. Because my list of things that I want to do is tremendous. But what I actually have time for most of the time is short while still longer than most other people's list of things that they do. So far, I've been doing a lot of sanding during class because right now at this stage in the year, or at least in this stage of the semester, because we just ended our third 9 weeks, which means we are 3/4 of the way through our school year officially. And I've been sitting just letting the students do their work because I've already shown them what they need to do. And now it's just work time and feedback. And so unless they need help, I don't have to do anything. And if I do, it's more of an interruption to them and their workflow. So I get to sit back and sand legs and work on weird shapes and sculptural things just while I'm letting them do their things. And then as they finish, they come over and they talk to me about it. We kind of give like a little mini critique and they ask me what I'm doing and I show them pictures of the process and they're like, how do you do that? So I get to tell them all about what I'm doing, which is fun. And I've been moving quite along, like pretty quickly along on a new project. So I made a couple more pieces for it today. It's got 11 pieces that all come together in a sculptural thing. Almost all of them are wood. 3 small pieces are resin. Most of it's a combination of turned and carved. So kind of my typical thing. It's almost all black except for the resin components. So I'm really excited about it. And I had a goal to be done by the end of this last week, but I think I'll be able to finish it tomorrow. So far, the last few weeks, or like the last month or so, I've made more than I have in the last year or so. So I'm on a roll and I'm going to keep going and hopefully the momentum continues through break and I'll be able to maybe make another entire piece before the end of break. So I'm really excited about it. And then along with that, I've just been with school. I should be doing this as I'm in class, but then all day on Friday, I basically just had to sit in front of 2 or 3 different screens, grading and working on other student-related computer stuff, and it was driving
those
me
pesky
crazy.
students.
Well, it was like 8 straight hours of computer time, and I hate computer time, so I try to limit it when I can.
She says while in front of a computer recording a podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean that's about it. I haven't really done too much. I've just kind of been super focused on the things that I am doing, which is just that one piece and grading. Mostly just grading.
Now, when you were talking about the 11-piece item that you're working on, I'm fairly certain I heard a little chuckle out of Eli. Amateur.
11.
No. That's not what. Not at all. That's not what I was laughing at. All right.
It's okay,
No.
Eli. We like to pick on it.
No.
And Bob, what have you been up to?
Well, I had huge plans for this weekend, and they decided at work that we needed to have a power outage to upgrade some things in the plant. So at 3 a.m. I got up on Saturday and went to work for a little while, got all the computer systems, the servers and stuff shut down, came home and thought, you know what, between now and the time they bring it back up, I'll service my lawnmower because I didn't do it at the end of the year. Spark plug, clean the air filter, change the oil. Nice and simple. Maybe sharpen the blade, right? No. I got called back into work 2 additional times. I was on the phone with them all day. I ended up finding out that last year, and I'm a little bit perturbed, but at the end of the year, my son, when he cuts the grass, is supposed to wash out under the mower. Well, he raised the mower up and sprayed it out, but he didn't wash it out. He just wetted the grass. There was literally still damp grass from November under my mower, and some of it had rusted through. So I have been sanding and repairing the mower. I ended up repairing the 2 back tires. He didn't bother to tell me that the back tires were leaning like this. They're leaning at probably 30-degree angles, right? which means the bushings inside of the tires have broken loose. So I did actually turn those out of Delrin and make Delrin bushings and fix those. I've just been doing a ton of repair the last 2 days to my mower. I did finally get a break today whenever I sprayed a primer on there that kills the rust and then primes it. I have to wait 24 hours to paint it. So I got a little break, and I worked on my bushing storage today, and I just uploaded the video, which it became available to my patrons for their early preview, and will hit the channel in a couple of days for bushing storage, and I'm really excited about it. It's something that I've needed to do for a long time. So that really, between turning the bushings for the wheels on my mower out of Delrin and working on this rack, that's really all I did in the shop that is maker related. The rest of it is your usual household, having to take care of things around the house. So it wasn't as big of a weekend as I had planned. I literally had a list of things I wanted to do and got none of them done. So typical weekend, right? So that's it for me.
Yeah. Well, I was officially told by Indiana that I'm an old man, and was able to get my first Pfizer shot this past week. And that was exciting, let me tell you. Sitting around with a bunch of other people 6 feet apart. How's your arm feel? Yeah, it's okay. Yeah. That's really all I've accomplished this week.
I'm postponing mine. I've decided, I spoke with my doctor, I had a checkup, and I asked him, okay, doc, because he did a big COVID study. He was on the national news for the study he did. So he's got a pretty good grip of what's going on. And I said, hey, doc, tell me, what's the deal? And he said, you're healthy. He said, the season is starting to taper off a little bit. People are starting to get their shots. He goes, if you're okay with it, he goes, I'd recommend waiting 12 months. So that way, if someone like Mike who got the shot grows 2 heads, I know not to take it. Because the way he explained it is it's going to be a booster shot like the flu shot. You're going to get it every year, right? So he said it came to market a little too quick for his comfort level. So he recommended that if I'm willing to take the chance to keep wearing the mask and keep social distancing and let it sit for about 12 months and then start taking the series of shots. So I've decided.
I have noticed, though, a bump right here on my shoulder.
It's the second head coming.
See, it could be that second head growing.
If it starts talking, I'll let you know.
So I decided to postpone.
Yeah, he is a jerk.
Yeah. But that was at my doctor's advice. So I did seek it was not something I made loosely or lightly. It was a well thought out decision. I was going back and forth on it, and he pretty well. I didn't tell him my opinion. I let him tell me, and then I decided to give it 12 months. Because I was kind of nervous about it too, hitting so quickly. I know we need it; it's important, but I don't need a second head growing out of my shoulders. I can't stand the one I've got. There's too many voices in it. Good God knows what would happen if I had another one.
2 heads are all the rage these days. You're missing out.
Yeah.
It's strange that he said that, because that's kind of why I put off getting it. I felt like it's a good thing, but I feel like it was also rushed a little bit. So I figured, it's not that I don't want it. I just want to wait and see what happens. Because I'm worried like a year from now, you're going to hear that commercial that comes on TV. If you took the COVID vaccine, you may be entitled to compensation. Exactly. It's like, okay.
So you know what's going to happen? Michael's going to have 2 heads, but he's going to make $1 million in his class action suit. Me, I'm going to be poor. See? Jeez.
He's going to make $1 million off of having 2 heads, too. He's going to be rich.
Yeah, but I'll have another mouth to feed at that point, so...
You'll need the money.
And on a person this big already, another mouth is not a good thing.
Well, you could eat in stereo. You could taste it in 2 different hemispheres.
I could be a food commentator. One head eating it, the other head saying, "You know what? This is pretty good. I like this stuff." Oh,
well, you could
eat terrible.
You could put chocolate ice cream in one mouth and vanilla in the other, and just have at it.
Yeah.
Create your own swirl.
I'm kind of liking this 2-head idea now. And that's a great thing about this show. We have so many tangents. We can talk about anything, literally. Anything.
Anything.
So there's really no way to segue out of that conversation. So let's just hop into talking to Eli. So
okay, well, I'm here, so we'll go with it.
Why don't you give us some background about you? How did you get started with turning?
That's kind of it's kind of a drug out story, so I'll shrink it down as best I can. I've been basically a woodworker for as long as I can remember. I think the first time I used the skill saw, I was maybe 8 years old, and built tree houses and stuff like that as a kid. What kid didn't? But then going into high school and junior high, we had wood shop class, and I always did really well in those. And then my freshman year of high school, in my wood shop class, I actually got one of the best grades there. So what they do is if you do really well in the class, they put your face on the wall, your name and face. So my name and face is still to this day hanging in the Hall of Fame for that school for my wood shop class.
Nice.
That's awesome.
So I ended up, which is kind of weird because I don't think I'd be where I am right now doing what I'm doing if certain things hadn't happened. After my freshman year of high school, my house caught on fire and burned down. So we had to move, and I didn't want to switch school districts necessarily because I grew up in the military, and every couple years I left all my friends behind. So what I did to stay in my school district is I chose to go to a vocational school versus a standard high school. And in that vocational school, I took a carpentry class. We built, over the 3 years that I was in that class, we built 2 full houses and donated them.
Nice.
And, did all that stuff. So after I graduated from high school, I worked as a carpenter, a framer, a roof framer, a trim guy, and then I started working in a cabinet shop because that's really where I wanted to be. And so I spent 4 years in a cabinet making environment, and then I decided I wanted to do countertops. So I got into Corian, wood, laminate, and now I do, as a profession, I make granite countertops. But I've always been interested in turning wood, and one year for my birthday, my wife just bought me a cheap Harbor Freight lathe, and I was like, oh, that's nice, thank you. That's wonderful. So I put it in my shed, and I didn't touch it for a year. It just sat there, and I think I did like 1 or 2 little things on it, and then I ran into a spot where I was just kind of slow at work, and I didn't have anything going on, so I got in there, and that's when I just started messing around with it, and I did my first segmented turning, and I really enjoyed it. So that's when I actually started looking into things like AAW, WOW, things like that. So that was about, I'm going to say 4 years ago. And ever since then, it's just been seeing what I can do and how far I can take it, really. So that's my condensed story of how I got into it. I guess I've just always been a craftsman, and wood turning was just the next evolution in that step, I guess. And I really like it, so I've been sticking with it.
Mm-hmm. Now, what was it about segmenting that really sparked your interest?
That's interesting, and I've given that a lot of thought. What I really like about segmenting is that it takes things to the next level. Whereas if I just put a log on my lathe and turn a bowl or a vase or whatever, it's just a bowl or a vase. And and again, I'm speaking from my perspective. I understand that there's some people that really like that, and so do I. But what I wanted to do was to be able to draw with my wood, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. I wanted to paint a picture, but I didn't want to use paints to do it. I wanted to use wood to do it. And where I was kind of running into an issue with the segmenting, because I started really looking into it, was everything looked, without trying to put it in the best terms that I can, everything looked pixelated, if that makes sense. Kind of like an old Mario Brothers game where everything's just blocks,
right.
It's squares, it's angles. It looks like an old, And my thought on that was I wanted to not be pixelated. I wanted sweeping motions. I wanted curves. I wanted subtle lines, things like that. So that's kind of what led me into where I'm doing what I'm doing now. Is I didn't want to stick with the pixelated look, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how to explain it. So if I'm not making sense, feel free to say so.
No, you're making sense. You're talking like the sprites that they used to draw. Say a sprite would have been the block Mario that would have been in the video games.
Yeah.
So
it's like if you could draw a picture with segmenting, but it was always blocky looking, if you know what I mean. And I kind of wanted to get away from that. And I ran into a lot of people that were like saying you can't do this because of this or that, and it's like, but you can if you know it. If you you actually can. You just have to kind of go beyond what you've been told and what you've learned, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So, were there many resources available to you to learn about the type of segmenting that you do, or was it mostly self-taught?
It's all self-taught.
All self-taught.
I'm not going to say that anything that I'm doing is particularly unique because I don't know, but I do keep an eye on the wood turning world and the craftsman world and things like that. But I'm very careful about what I expose myself to, if that makes sense, because I don't want it to hinder me in any way. I don't want it to hinder what I want to do, and that may sound a little bit odd, but I kind of got to go back in time to explain this mentality of mine. When I was really young, I was into Garfield. If you guys watch him, like Garfield and Heathcliff, and I went to one of those bookstores that they have at the book show that they have at the schools where you go in and you pick out your books and your mom and dad pay for it and all that. But anyways, I picked up a Garfield poster, and this thing hung on the back of my door from the time I was about 5 years old to about 12 or 13. And the poster said, it had Odie, the dog, up in the tree, and Garfield was down on the ground looking up at him. And it said, "It's amazing what you can accomplish when one doesn't know what one can't do." In other words, if Odie didn't know he wasn't supposed to be able to climb the tree, he probably would have never climbed the tree. But because he didn't know he wasn't supposed to climb the tree, he easily climbed the tree, So from a young age, I've kind of always had that mentality of, if you're going to tell me I can't do it, I'm most likely going to try and do it. And that's kind of gotten me into some trouble. But it's also worked out in some cases as well. So I'm very careful what I limit myself to, because I watch a lot of wood turning videos where they talk about, basic principles of turning, and all that stuff is very important to learn how to use your tools properly and all of that kind of stuff. But taking it a step further, myself being a craftsman and being in so many different fields, like I can work with stone, metal, wood, glass, it doesn't matter. So I'm looking at the fundamentals and I'm thinking, how can I modify that to get to the point to where I want to be, and some of these guys that I watch are like, this is the way it's done. This is it. There's no variation, do it this way or don't do it at all. And I think that has a very limiting kind of effect on people mentally that maybe not as involved in this type of an industry. You know what I mean? And it's like, so my approach is always, if you tell me I can't do it, I'm going to do everything I can to do it in a safe way, a right way, to pull it off, so I can say, yeah, look, you can do it. You know what I mean? So I limit what I expose myself to, if that makes sense, because I don't want to be limited in what I'm doing, if that makes any sense at all.
It makes perfect sense, because I sort of subscribe to the same philosophy. I always tell people there's more than one way to skin a cat, right? As long as you're being safe with what you're doing, and it works, then it's probably right. People will tell you it's not, but I agree 100%. The limiting factor of people telling you can't do something is the thing that makes you want to try it more than anything.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I had a discussion in a wood turning group the other day. It was online. It was a beginners group, and one of the beginners had said, "I'm having an issue with this." I'm not going to go into detail what it was, nothing like that. I'm just going to kind of very roughly say what was happening there. So the original poster said, "I'm having an issue with this. This is causing me catches and stuff like that." So my solution was, you can do it with what you have. There's a safe way to do it, but you have to go about it this way. And I got hammered for it. Oh. You're telling them to do it the wrong way. You shouldn't be doing that, this and that, and this and that. And I'm like, look, I don't know what this beginning wood turner has available to them as far as tools go. Mm-hmm. What you're telling this beginning wood turner is, you've got to go out and buy a new $100 chisel in order to do what you want to do. And if you don't buy that $100 chisel, you're not going to pull it off. And so basically what you're telling this beginner is, if you don't go out and spend money and buy this nice, expensive stuff, just give it up. And I'm saying, no, you don't have to buy anything new. You don't need all that fancy stuff. You just have to figure out how to make what you have work for you in a safe way. I'm not saying be dangerous about it, and that's one of my big pet peeves is, it's like, there are so many tools available now to us as wood turners. But if you go back even 50 years, the amount of tools that we have available is cut by maybe 2/3. And if you go back another 50 years, all they were using was scrapers, So it's like, we've kind of built this mentality in every industry, including, the industries that I work in, where once you reach a certain point, if you don't have this, it's impossible. And that's just not the case. And it's kind of a pet peeve of mine. It's like, don't limit somebody and their potential by telling them, if you don't do it this way, you can't do it. If you don't have this piece of equipment, you can't do it. I mean, in all reality, you can turn a bowl on you can take a drill press, lay it on its side, and turn a bowl if you want to. If you do it safe and you think about it, you can. But you're only limited by what you kind of limit yourself to, if that makes sense.
Oh, perfect sense. I mean, you can't make a light bulb. You need to go out and buy these new beeswax candles. If they would have listened to that, Thomas Edison would have listened to that, where would we be today, right? It's exactly right. I agree 100% with what you're saying.
It's like when I got into segmenting and I was doing some of the stuff that I was doing, I was told by some of the other segmenters, well, that's not going to work. And the question was always, why? Well, you've got to worry about expansion and contraction. It's like, yes, you do, but you understand that you can stabilize wood now, which severely cuts down on the expansion and contraction. So now you've got an entire, now if you're stabilizing your wood, now you can do things that you weren't able to do before you were stabilizing your wood. You can do segmenting in a way that you're not as worried about it as you used to be. Yes, it's a lot more effort, a lot more work. You have to go through the effort of stabilizing all your wood and things like that. Not all of my wood is stabilized. Some of it is where it's key to be stabilized, where it needs to be dimensionally stable. And some areas where the wood doesn't need to be as dimensionally stable, I don't worry about it. But that's kind of what I'm getting at, is like, there's been so many innovations and things like that over time that that when somebody says you can't do that, my first inclination is, yes, you can. You just got to figure it out, And that's kind of my approach with everything.
Rebecca, you have questions?
No, I'm just in complete agreement with that kind of mindset. And I get that all the time, where people are either really confused by how something is done, so they don't understand it and they resist it. So that's why they have the mentality like that's not the right way. Or just you're thinking of a design, or you're trying to think of a concept and they're telling you it's not possible. So then it just gives you even more motivation to prove them wrong. And I don't know.
You're absolutely right.
It's frustrating, but it's also kind of exhilarating, because it does give you the opportunity to prove that you're right about that thing that you know is true. And just people are sometimes, I don't know if they're just closed-minded or if they just can't wrap their head around the idea, but it's in in a slightly selfish way, it just gives you the opportunity to just stick it to him and be like, yeah, I told you could do that, you know? Like I said it was possible, and it's possible. Look, it's done. And then you're still going to have some people that are just like, well, that's not right. But I don't know. Those people, you just need to like tell them to go away.
Well, that's part of why I only film certain aspects of what I do. It's because I just want to avoid the flack at this point on some of the things that I do, because I know for a fact that they're not conventional, and I just don't want to hear it, to be honest with you. It's like the end result is in my hands. You can see it, you can hold it, you can touch it, it's right here. So if you're going to tell me that I did it wrong, then I'd like to see how you do it. You know, go ahead and make the same thing and, you know, come up with your own processes, but don't tell me it's wrong because I'm holding it in my hand.
Right.
You know. And I think it goes beyond that too. I think it's also like a state of mind among all craftsmen, really, and it kind of depends on your approach to what you want to do. There's a guy named George Dantzig. Anyways, he was a mathematician a while back. He's actually the guy that the movie Good Will Hunting was based off of.
Oh.
And why I'm talking about this right now is because this guy, he was a son of a math teacher, and he went to college, and he was late for his classes all the time. He walks into his class one time, and there's two problems on the board, and he just assumes that it's his math homework. So he writes it down. He goes home, and he struggles with it all weekend. He comes in that following Monday and turns it in. A week goes by. He doesn't hear anything. He comes to class, and there's a substitute teacher in the class, and the student aide comes up and hands him a note and tells him to go to the office. So he goes to the principal's office. The principal's there with all the professors that are in this field, and they're like, how'd you solve those problems? And he's like, what are you talking about? It was my homework. I went home and solved it. And they're like, no, those were two unsolvable problems. They were like the best mathematicians in the world had been working on these problems for years. And he basically said, if I had gotten to class on time and you told me that those problems were unsolvable, I would have never even tried it. I would have never solved them. And even if I had tried it, in the back of my mind, they were unsolvable, so I would have never figured them out. So that's just another reflection of if you don't know it can be done, you're more likely to search for the answer and go to whatever extreme is necessary to pull it off. Versus you showing up to a class and somebody right away tells you this can't be done. You know, everybody in that class that heard those couple words, this can't be done, is now affected by that few set of words there. Versus coming into the class and here's two math problems, give it a shot, see if you can figure it out, and just leaving it at that. You know. So I think we kind of set ourselves back in a way, you know, because if you walk into something with the mentality that it can't be done, you're already 2 steps behind, you know. And it always makes me wonder what the potential of everybody out there is if you get rid of the doubt, if you get rid of the idea that it can't be done, you know. And that's really my approach to literally everything that I do, whether it be wood turning or anything. It doesn't matter because I'm a painter too. So if I'm painting something and I want to come up with a new method for what I'm doing, I'll mess around with it until I get it the way that I want it to be, you know. So that's kind of how I walk through my life. And I'm very careful with what I show people because I'm worried about being affected by the comments that come back. You shouldn't be doing that. It can't be done like, you know. That stuff does have an effect on the human mind, whether you say it does or it doesn't. So I'm very reserved on what I share, what I put out there for people to see at this moment. Once I've refined it to a point where I'm 100% confident in it, then I put it out for the world to see, and everybody else can just like it or hate it. It's up to them.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I think sometimes people just enjoy telling you that you're doing something wrong because it makes them feel maybe smarter or better. You know what I mean? Because you've heard the old adage of a professor walks into the classroom and writes 10 problems on the board, and the 10th problem is written incorrectly, and the first thing the student does in the class is raise his hand and say, "Oh, that one's wrong. Your equation's wrong," or whatever. And he's like, "Look, I did 9 things correctly and 1 thing incorrectly, and all you're focusing on is what I'm doing incorrectly instead of what I did right." And it was, to prove a point.
Yeah.
So I think there are people who just specialize in really wanting to find something you're doing wrong so they can point it out and take you down a notch and make you look like you're not as talented as you are, because you do have this talent to make these incredible things. And maybe it's a little bit of jealousy, maybe it's a little bit of envy, I don't know, but they just have to look for that point to knock you down. So I understand not showing things, because I have a bad habit of showing everything in my videos, my mistakes and everything, and talking about them and trying to correct them. And over the years, I've taken a beating from people. Of course, I just delete them from my account. It's like, screw you, you're gone, boop, and I delete them. But, because I don't need the negative naysayers for the same exact reason. I'm trying to show people that you can do this. This is easy. Anybody can do it, with limited tools. Now, of course, my tool base has grown over the years, which, I'm just lucky at that. But I did it with limited tools before I had all those fancy tools. So I like your message.
Well, the other thing that I really, 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 really work on is I'm looking for the most basic way that I can do any task. Mm-hmm. And some people want to be real technical, set up all these fancy jigs, do all kinds of wild stuff. And really what my goal is to simplify it to where anybody coming in off the street, if they listen to what I'm saying and do what I'm showing them, anybody within a couple weeks can be doing exactly what I'm doing. And a lot of things that, let me rephrase that. Everything that I have done so far, you can do with a table saw, a router, and a lathe, period. Everything. It just comes down to simplifying it in your mind. The first thing that you want to do is, like, let's just say you want to inlay a dandelion leaf into a vase. Well, I start breaking it down like, okay, how am I going to make the leaves? And that's an individual project in itself. So then you make the leaf, the petal parts. How am I going to surround the petals? That's an individual project, and I break it down to the bare minimum of tools and effort that I can. And this is where really the time comes in, because I've done vases that took 300 hours. And the amount of time of thought work that goes into it might be 5,000 hours of just processing it in your brain. But that cuts down the time of manufacturing that particular project, because you've broken it down into its most basic form, and every single aspect of it becomes its own project. And I think that people get overwhelmed, because if you look at some of my projects as a whole, it's like, I don't think so, I'm not doing that. But if you break it down into individual projects, each one is this individual step, then all of a sudden it becomes less tedious, less overwhelming, and you're not looking at the whole picture. You're looking at individual parts that you're later going to fit together into one big piece, if that makes any sense at all.
No, it does.
Everything that I work on is kind of done in that manner. And what's really odd, and what kind of really, I think, makes people wonder how I get done what I get done is, I never have a drawing when I set out to do a project, ever. I have one basic idea, and I build off of that idea, and it's all done basically in my head. Every project that you see, there is maybe a page of notes, about a half a page long, and usually it's just angles. That's it. And that's what I build my projects off of. Whereas I know a lot of people use software and things like that. That's just not the way that my mind works. I have to break it down into individual little pieces. And because I'm doing that, there is no way to really draw it out for me. So all this stuff gets stored in my head, which kind of gets overwhelming sometimes. But it's broken down into such small parts that it's easy for me to organize it in my head versus on a piece of paper. Because when if I were to write down on a piece of paper what I do physically in real life, I would look at it later and I wouldn't even know what I was looking at. That probably doesn't make much sense to most people, but it would be like reading French for me. So I don't even bother.
I imagine that the designs that you see in your head are like the exploded view of a piece of machinery where everything is kind of like taken apart and expanded and then comes back together.
Absolutely.
Is that what it's like?
That's basically what it is. Yes, absolutely. That's the best way you can put it. And like, if you take something like my big herringbone vase, which I've done several herringbone vases, that actually did not start out as a herringbone vase. It actually started out as the base piece that had like the petals on it. I don't know if you are familiar with the piece I'm talking about.
I think so.
But that's what it started out. It started out as a piece that was maybe 3 inches tall and about 6 inches in diameter, and then it turned into a vase that's about 24 inches tall and about 8 inches in diameter when it was all done. But that's where it started, was one little ring, basically a feature ring that's at the bottom of the vase now. And it just turned into, it just took its own direction, went its own way. Mm-hmm. And I've got two urns that I have to do for dogs, which I mentioned earlier, and those are going to be 2 art projects. They're going to be very in-depth and very detailed, and I'm starting on those this week. And if what I have in my head comes out the way that it's supposed to, it should be pretty impressive, you know. So we'll see what ends up happening with that.
So what happens with most of the pieces that you make? Are they sold as art, or are you working strictly on commission for each piece?
Some of my pieces have sold as art, and some of them have been commissioned. Some of my bigger pieces I still have. I can't come to the decision on whether I want to sell them or hang on to them. Like, my wife loves them and she doesn't want to see any of them go, but I'm like, we can't fill the house up with these things. I mean, you know what I mean? We got to sell them. So
that would be a very interesting episode of Hoarders.
Yeah,
if an entire house was filled up with segmented vases.
It's hard to part with 300 hours worth of work at any price. You know what I mean? I mean, if you think about it, when you put that much time just into the creation, not counting the time you put into breaking it down into little pieces so that you could handle each individual step, it's hard to part with that because it becomes a part of you.
Absolutely. Especially when you're kind of building it entirely out of your head, you know, it takes a lot. I mean, I'm kind of a strange person in a way because I only sleep about 4 hours a night, and that's my average, which isn't like normal, but it's like, that's just the way my head works. It never shuts off. Like, it's constantly at 100 miles an hour. So I'm not sure how to solve that problem yet. I'm still working on it.
I'm still working on that one too.
Yeah, I think most creative people are.
Yeah.
So this is the point of the interview where I typically steal one of Rebecca's questions.
Oh,
so
no.
Yeah, I'm going to let you ask it this time.
I swear, I don't have them written anywhere. I don't have them anywhere other than in my head, and somehow he manages to steal them word for word. It's really frustrating. So I'm going to ask my question first, and then you can steal my next one.
Go ahead.
Do you have a favorite piece that you ever made? And if so, where is it now?
I do, and I'm looking at it.
Oh.
It's the vase that I was talking about earlier, and it's sitting at the end of my bed on a table. So yes, I still have it, and that was one of my more involved pieces. And I don't. If the price was right, I would sell it, because in the back of my head, I have this thing where I can always make another one, which is kind of maybe a big mistake. But at the same time, it's like, if I just hold on to all of these pieces and keep them locked up in my house, then that's all they'll ever be. You know what I mean? So if you really want your work to be seen, it's kind of a tough thing to sell it. But at the same time, if the right person's going to come along and is going to appreciate it, and I know it's going to be well taken care of, then yes, it'll go, you know. So I'm not opposed to selling anything, but the price has to be right. You know, it's kind of like if you raise like prize dogs, you're careful who you sell them to.
Mm.
You know, you're not going to sell them to somebody who's going to beat it and treat it bad, you know? So yeah, I am careful about that kind of thing, but I do, I do still have that piece. Yes.
And what's the typical scale of your piece? Because I've seen some of them and I was really surprised by this.
I have I have some pieces that are like an inch and a half tall that are very, very inlaid and ornate, and then I have some pieces that are 20 inches tall, and then I have some that are spears that are I have some spears that I've done that are only about an inch in diameter that are very intricate.
That's great.
And yes, they are hollow, and yes, they are 100% segmented.
And the photos are very deceiving on those vases.
Yes, they are.
So many of them look like they've got to be like 12, 14 inches tall, and I see them and they're like 2.5.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So my scale, I'm going to say right now, my scale is between about an inch in diameter all the way up to about 24 inches. That's typically where I roam around in there.
So now you were talking about possibly going back and remaking a piece. Now I know on a lot of your pieces you deal with compound angles that you're cutting on a table saw in order to make your segments.
Yeah.
Do you have jigs that are set up to where it's the jig that's creating those angles and you can easily repeat them, or do you have to go back and reset the table saw to a particular degree in order to make those cuts?
If there are some pieces that I have no interest in remaking, and those pieces I make throwaway jigs and they go in the trash when I'm done. But the pieces that I do plan on remaking, I always make jigs that are 100% unmovable. In other words, they are fixed, and they just hang on a wall. Mm-hmm. And all the pieces that go with that jig, in other words, if let's just say I need a 13-degree angle for something, I will cut that 13-degree angle, and then I'll take something that's not going to move, like a piece of acrylic that's 3/4 of an inch by inch and whatever, and I'll cut an angle on there, and that angle will stay with my jig. So when I set my table saw, I can, I set it on the table saw itself and press it up to the blade and meet that angle, and then my jigs are all set up to where I know where to set and all my notes are on my jigs. So if I need my jig to be 13 inches away from the blade, set at a 13-degree angle, I've got everything to where I can set it up relatively quickly and just go to it, And those jigs are permanent jigs. They never move. They are what they are. I know a lot of people who do buy the segmenting jigs. You can easily change the angles and stuff like that. My jigs aren't like that. They're fixed. They're permanent.
And preferred material for your jigs, is that Corian?
I use a lot of Corian for my jigs, yes, and MDF. And I typically, when I use MDF, I stick with a 1-inch thick MDF. I kind of stay away from the 3/4-inch stuff. I just find it to be a lot more rigid, I don't know, it's just my preference. Yeah. But I prefer a 1-inch thick MDF or Corian. But the thing with me is I'm lucky in the fact that I'm actually a Corian fabricator, so I have like probably 5 tons of scrap behind my shop. So it's for me, it's no problem to just walk out back and grab a piece and I'm ready to go. Yeah. So I understand a lot of people don't have like easy access. My dogs are going crazy, sorry. But that don't have easy access to materials like that. But fortunately, I am. And just for anybody who wants Corian or anything like that, if you find a shop in your area, just go up there and be like, what are you throwing away? They'll most likely give it to you for free because they have to pay to dump the stuff, and it's heavy. So they'll give you free scraps. You just got to find where it's at.
Is there a piece? Here's a question that I'm stealing from Rebecca. And I'm getting the daggers again. Is there a piece that you have sold that you regret selling and want to get back?
No, I can't say that there is, because I know where every single piece that I've sold has gone. and I know that they are safe, and I know that the people that purchase them enjoy them quite a bit, so I don't regret selling anything. No.
That's a nice feeling. I can't say I feel the same way about all of my pieces. Have you ever donated any of your pieces to like SWAT has its 2-for-1 raffle at the end of the show where I think it's the last day that all of the art pieces that are donated to the raffle are raffled off, or maybe it's the second to the last, and it just can go to anyone, which is terrifying. Like, I don't know these people. I don't know how this thing is going to be treated that I spent weeks and weeks on. I don't know what the life expectancy is. I don't even know if it's going to make it home in one piece. So the idea of that is it's an honor to be asked to donate a piece, but I've started scaling back quite a bit since my earlier couple years when I was making these really big, elaborate things that I should have just hung on to. But I didn't. And I don't know. Have you ever done anything like that?
I haven't, but I plan on it. And the only reason that I have not is because I haven't had my home shop in my backyard where I could work easily. So when I make pieces, I'm kind of limited. So because my other shop is 20 minutes from my house, and that's where my big table saw is and all that. So I'd have to go there and then come back and then go. So I was limited on the amount of pieces that I could put out because just I had to jump through a bunch of hoops to create them. But now that I've got this new shop there, it's actually been kind of a plan of mine to do that. And when I do, they're not going to be like my pinnacle pieces. That won't happen. Mm-hmm. But yes, I mean, I do have plans on doing that. And part of that is I kind of want people to see what I'm doing. And in order to do that, you kind of, in my mind, you kind of just have to put it out there. And that's one of the ways to put it out there,
mm-hmm. Awesome. Bob, you don't have as many questions as you usually do.
No, I'm kind of asking things as I go along. I'm really kind of listening because this is one of those guests that you kind of want to pick the brain, right? And just kind of like learn.
Well, go ahead. I'm here. You can ask any question you want.
Well, that's. I'm learning.
Here we go.
I've been sitting here taking notes while I got my book full of notes. So I'm stealing all your best ideas right now, Eli.
Take them all. Enjoy.
Don't worry, it's all in the show notes at this point. You should see my running list.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Well, it's interesting because usually my ideas for these projects come from the most ridiculous places. I've gotten inspiration by walking through the dollar store and seeing a print on a hand towel. I'm not kidding. That's just where it comes from. So it's just, and the spheres that I have been making, the dodecahedrons, I know that those have been done in wood turning and woodworking for a while, but I never knew they existed. And I did a countertop for somebody, and they had lights that hung above the island, and they were dodecahedrons. And I was like, I bet I could turn that into a sphere. So I went home and I started looking on YouTube, and sure enough, it's there. But I took it and I did what I wanted to with it,
Yeah.
So I did a little research because whenever I do a project, I always research it first, and I dig deep. I'll spend days scouring the internet because I don't really want to do anything that has been done before, if that makes sense. Like if I have an idea for an inlay or whatever, I want it to be unique, and I don't want to be accused of taking somebody else's idea, if that makes sense. So I'm very careful about how I go about things. I get it. Everything's been done before, but has it been done in this way or has it been done in that way? I don't know. So I'm really careful about how I do everything. I just, it's kind of like a challenge for me, if that makes any sense.
I mean, I was browsing through your Instagram, and I think I like small projects. I don't like big projects because I never seem to have the time to do big projects. And I'm just, of course, looking at your small projects, your finials and your spheres. Those small projects are those are time consumers, man. They're as bad as building a desk or So I don't think I would have time to do those. I mean, I'm totally just fascinated by them, but yeah, right now they're out of the scope of what I do.
That kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier, where if you've kind of just made that decision, then that's always going to be the way that it is. But I am doing a class at Mark Adams School of Woodworking. As long as everything with COVID and enough people decide to take the class, that class will still happen. And I'm going to be showing how to do finials and stuff like that. And the goal of that is, I mean, I can literally make a segmented finial that you've probably never seen before in maybe 4 hours.
Ooh, wow.
And that's because I've developed the processes, I've made the jigs, I've done all of that. And if if you talk to somebody or you actually take a class with somebody, I'm not necessarily saying me, with somebody who is doing something that you're interested in, and you find out that's a lot quicker than I thought it was. But I always thought it was more complicated because looking at it from the outside in, it looks more complicated. And that's one of the things that I really strive to do with my work is, like, I don't want my work to look complicated, if that makes sense. When you see it, I want you to say, oh, that's a nice vase. And then the more you look at it, well, how did that happen? How did this happen? How did that happen? But I don't want it, because there are certain things, like, when I say this, I might get some flack from some people, so don't take it, this is just my personal opinion. I see bowls and segmented bowls all the time, like the Dizzy bowls. I see them, I understand the amount of work, the amount of time, the amount of effort that went into it, but it does nothing for me. You know what I mean? It looks complicated, you know what I mean? And it is complicated, but, so what I want my pieces to look like you could walk into a store and buy it, but I want a woodworker, a professional, to look at it and just think, wait a second, that doesn't look right. That's interesting. How did that happen? And then the more you pick it apart, the more you realize the amount of effort that went into it. So simplicity is always my goal. So when you look at a piece, it's not supposed to come off as like insanely complicated until you study it, if that makes sense. And that's kind of a hard thing to pull off, Because like I said, with the Dizzy bowls, yeah, it looks complicated. You look at it, it's complicated. I don't want my work to look complicated, I don't know if that makes sense to anybody but me. Maybe it doesn't.
Yeah, that was one of the questions I was going to ask, is if you ever had or were going to do teaching on your segmenting. So that's interesting to know that you're going to be doing that through Mark Adams. That's the school in Indiana, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And I think my class is August, the end of August, yeah. And all the information is on his website. So, yeah, it's at the end of August. And it's going to be a 1-week class, and we're going to be doing finials, and I'm going to show how to make my pinwheel inlay, which I've done in several of my spheres. So that should be a good one if you're interested in that kind of thing. And we're gonna go through all the process of how to make it. We're gonna go over jig making, design, layout. The process of coming up with a concept all the way through, kind of planning out how you're gonna make it, what tools you're gonna use, all that stuff. Because there's so many different routes you can go. And again, like I was saying earlier, my entire approach is to simplify it as much as humanly possible. So I'm going to say, if you have very minimal woodworking experience, you're going to take this class and you're going to walk out of there with those 2 pieces, and they're going to be as good as if I had done them, because I've simplified it so much to where literally anybody can do it. It's just a matter of kind of getting your mind in the right headspace and understanding, oh, this is simple. Each step is simple. But if you look at it as a whole, it's complicated. So that's kind of one of the worst things you can do, is kind of to look at it as a whole. One step at a time is always the best way to go. For me anyways. I don't want to speak for everybody, because some people just jump in there and do it all, and I'm like, oh, I couldn't do that. It's a little weird.
So this class will focus on the entire process of making that finial then. So you're also going to be teaching turning technique. Is that correct? Yeah, because segmented finials get very, very complicated when you're turning them on a lathe. You can just chuck a piece of ebony in a lathe and spin a finial. It's no problem. But when you have lines that go vertically up the finial, and the thinnest part of your finial might be 1/8 of an inch, if you're off even slightly, those lines are going to be like almost a solid color on one end, and then the spacing is going to be different on the other. Like, the smaller it becomes, the more accurate you have to be. So on your finials, when you're going down to your neck, like, everything has to be extremely precise, and which creates a problem on your lathe, because it has to be centered on your lathe perfectly. If your glue up is perfect and you're off center on your lathe, you're going to have the same effect. So it cannot be spun or turned like a normal finial. It has to be turned between centers, and the center point of that finial has to stay center the entire time. If it gets off just a little bit, it shows like drastically. So there's a process even down to that, where if you're not very careful with what you're doing, and when I'm speaking, I'm making it sound more complicated than it is, because it's really not complicated. It's just how you approach it. You have to approach it in a way that's going to allow you to be successful with it,
That sounds like an awesome class. You said it's going to be at the end of August?
Yes.
Very cool.
And obviously I'm going to be there for the whole week, and I'm going to let whoever's in the class kind of pick my brain, and it can go beyond what I'm teaching there. My wife's probably going to be heading out there with me too. She goes everywhere with me. She's like my soulmate, so
that's awesome.
She tags along with me wherever I go. She's always there, which is, I wouldn't have it any other way.
Oh yeah, that's perfect.
But we'll be out there, and you'll be able to pick my brain the whole time.
Has your wife expressed any interest in turning?
Yes, but she's scared of it, which I understand. People do get hurt. I've been hurt, and so I think that's her only holdback. And I do get it. So, she's not. She's a handy person, as far as making stuff and things like that. She's very artistic as well. But it's just, I guess, not really like in depth her thing,
Mm-hmm. My wife has recently expressed interest in learning to turn, and when I said something to Rebecca and Bob about it, they were both like, well, you just lost your workshop.
That's right. That's right. There'll be pink doilies all over the place. It's going to be crazy.
Yeah, my wife's more into like furniture and stuff like that than she is into turning. Like, she wants to like flip furniture, like buy it at yard sales, do some work on it, and resell it. That's kind of, she, like I said, she's really good at that kind of thing. So
I figure a year from now, my shop is going to be hers, and I'll be the one sitting on the couch crocheting.
Yeah. Yes.
Nothing wrong with that.
So watch out, Rosetta. I'm coming after you.
Start turning those crochet needles now.
You can start a crocheting podcast.
You know Rosetta? Eli?
Do I know Rosetta?
Yeah.
It's Rosetta Hahn.
She's a.
I've heard the name, but I don't know.
She's a friend of the show.
I don't.
Yeah. She's a
Friend
big name in the pen turning
I'm familiar
community.
with a lot of people, but I'm kind of a hermit. So as far as people that I'm regularly in contact with, it's not like a long list.
Oh, let's be honest. Aren't we all hermits?
Oh, I guess so. I get wrapped up in what I'm doing, and I'll disappear for like a month.
Mm-hmm. So, Bob, Rebecca, do either of you have any more questions for Eli?
I don't.
Well, you can ask me anything. I'm here.
No, I appreciate that, and the nice thing is now that we've been informally introduced here, I'm more comfortable with just if I have a question, just sending you an email, right, or a DM on Instagram or something. So
you can find me anywhere. I'm easy to find. I just use my name for everything. So if you just type my name in, Facebook, Instagram, those are the only two social medias that I use. And I have an email address that I use too, which is politegeneral@msn.com, which I don't check as often as I should, but I try to be better at it than I have been in the past.
All right.
Wait, I have a question. Hold on.
Sorry.
I didn't have a chance to ask mine yet. So, and I think it would be a good last question. So, for the future, do you see your work kind of moving in the same direction, or do you see a shift anytime down the road? Or do you want to just keep going where you're going, and wherever it takes you is where you will end up?
That's actually an interesting question that I've given quite a bit of thought to, and I don't know. It's kind of like an evolution, I guess, is what you would call it. And I have some projects that I have started on that I have run into some technical issues on that are different in a way than what I have been working on. I know I'm being very cryptic here, but they're so far beyond what you guys have seen that it almost makes what I've done so far look like macaroni art. But
which is what I do on a regular basis. So yeah, okay, I can relate. Yeah, go ahead.
But I hear you. But some of those projects are sitting on a shelf. So where I see myself going is whatever fascinates me, really. And I get stuck on technical issues sometimes, and it might take me a year to get past that technical issue, but I will get past it. And those projects are going to be slightly different than what most people have seen. So I'm being cryptic, but I'm not trying to give away my projects either. So they are in a similar fashion to what you guys have seen out of me so far. But I have so many things that I want to do, and just not enough time. And I'm influenced by so many different things that where it goes, who knows? I don't know. And I'm as weird as this is going to sound, I try not to pay attention too much to the wood turning industry. Again, because I don't want it to influence me so much, and that's just the way my brain works. I tend to stick a lot more as far as influences go to the painted art world, if that makes sense. And really, the inspiration from there comes from seeing people doing things that I have never seen done before, or their work is just so far out there that it's like they're just going to do what they want, regardless of what the public says. And I'm friends with some of these people, so I've seen the backlash that they get from the art community. And some of these guys, I'll give you one of their names. If you look at his work, you'll probably be extremely fascinated by it. He's a painter out of New York, and I've been to some of his shows. His name is Nathan Galka, Galka. Nathaniel Galka. And there was one point where he actually got run off of Facebook because of the backlash that he was getting for some of his work. And his work is phenomenal. And it's so my inspiration comes from people who are not afraid to tell the rest of the world to basically pound sand, I'm going to do what I want. And, and they just push through it, and that's really where a lot of my inspiration comes from. So, where my work is going to go is kind of wherever I decide to take it, and backlash or not, it's going to happen. So,
Cool.
Sorry, I was trying to Google him real quick.
I was also doing the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of. I follow more painters than I do wood artists, and I've been to a lot of their shows. Like, a lot of them have openings in New York City and stuff, and I live 3 hours from New York, so it's not uncommon for me to go and meet these people and talk to them. Another one is a guy called Menton, Menton. His work is phenomenal. It's a little bit dark for most people, but I went to one of his openings. I got to meet him and talk to him. And another one is a guy named David, and it's better for me to spell his last name than to pronounce it. It's Stopakis. Stopakis.
Wait, spell it again?
But his work, Stopakis. His work is just phenomenal. Again, his work is kind of dark. It's not like Nathaniel's. And these are like my top inspirations. Another one is a lady named Kat King, Katking, and her husband. They do paintings that are they look like photographs.
Oh wow!
They're so real that they look like a photograph. It's just, and because even though it's not in the woodworking world, seeing people at this level of their craft is what's inspiring to me. It's like these people are doing what they want. They're just reaching down inside their soul and making a painting or making a sculpture. Like Nefer Kane is a sculpture that I follow. I've actually bought some of her work. She makes ball jointed dolls. She's really well known, but her work inspires me because if you look at all the other dolls out there, you can pick hers out in a crowd of 1,000, just instantly, her work. And that inspires me. And that's kind of what I'm going for with my work. Like if you put 10,000 wood turnings in there, there are people that you can look at it. You can say, I know that work, and Rebecca's one of them. I walk into a gallery, Rebecca's work. I mean, it's undeniable who made that. And that in a way is more inspiring to me than anything else. Like you've created something that stands out in a crowd, if that makes sense. So the way my work is going to go is whatever I'm inspired to do by whoever is around me that's inspiring me at that time.
Very cool. Can you just repeat one more time the doll maker?
Oh, her name is Nefer Kane, Nefer. Let me get her last name for you. I can find it very quickly. And her work, it's interesting because her work is she hand sculpts with clay her doll, right? And she does what is called BJDs, which is ball jointed dolls. Mm-hmm. And she sculpts with clay the original jaw, all the joints that kind of go together like a G.I. Joe figure. That would be a ball jointed doll because it articulates the arms move and everything. Well, what she does is she sculpts it with clay entirely, and then she sends it off to China where they make the molds and they will produce them, and then she'll have like maybe 100 of them made. Then they come back to her. She paints the faces and sends them off.
Oh my gosh!
And I mean, her last name is Kane, and actually she's doing a piece for me right now, and my wife's not supposed to know this because it's based off of my wife's face. She's doing a sculpture of my wife's face, and in return, I'm doing an ebony spear for her.
Oh my gosh!
And the trade was she has a son who's autistic. She's very open about it. And a few years ago, she had reached out to me to make her some toys out of wood that she couldn't find because her son is like 6'5". He's just a monstrous guy. He's a big guy, and he would tear his toys up. So I built him wooden toys that he couldn't destroy. So I've had a long-standing relationship with her as far as a friend, and she's out of France, actually. But her work is phenomenal. She's just a huge inspiration for me just because I'm seeing somebody who's basically telling the whole world, this is what I do, like it or love it. Mm. This is it, buy it or don't, Mm-hmm. And that right there is everything to me.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at some of her work right now, and
I am too.
Is the disproportionately sized head, is that like her calling card on the dolls that she makes?
Some of it, yeah. I mean, a lot of them are, not all of them. The one that I purchased from her is not disproportionate, but I do like that disproportionate thing. That's kind of, they're animated. But again, you look at her work and you can put other dolls next to her and her work is 100% unique. Nothing looks like hers, And it looks good. And you have to keep in mind that all of those are hand sculpted, like by hand with clay, so her work is phenomenal.
Those are so cool.
Mm-hmm.
One of them has spider legs.
Oh, here we
go. Here you go.
These are amazing.
But yeah, I mean, those are all people. Those are all people that kind of influence me, and they're not in the wood turning world. And I again, I'll just reiterate, it's because I just kind of want my influences not to be in that world, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I'm careful about that.
That makes sense. And I know that there are a lot of other artists too that go into the other art fields to try to find inspiration from. A lot of them come from ceramic and pottery backgrounds, and they find inspiration in those original vessel forms because those were the most utilitarian forms, and it was all about kind of the shape of the vessel, and that's kind of where they find a lot of their forms that they use now today. But I think it's really cool that you find a lot of your inspiration in paintings and just random things that you see in dollar stores and like light fixtures that you see in houses. It's so cool to be able to kind of absorb all of that in information and find your own inspiration in that, and then put out work that maybe has nothing to do with it, but just a tiny idea of where it came from. And I think that's just the coolest thing.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that because I live about an hour and a half from Washington, D.C., so one of my favorite things to do is walk through the Smithsonian's.
Oh, nice.
And some of the pottery that's in there that is like 10, 13, 14, 15,000 years old, you walk through there, and it's like you're looking at shapes and forms that are before the pyramids, and they didn't have the tools that we had, and you're looking at a shape or a form that is like literally perfection, and I mean they did this out of clay with no electricity in a hot sun,
right?
And the paintings on them, the shape, the form, it's like if you're able to have access or to look at stuff like this, it's not woodworking at all. I mean, you're looking at pottery.
But you know as well as I do that you can't do that without the Easy Wood negative rake scraper, Eli.
No, you can't. I mean, you need that.
You just basically brought it right back to your first point, which I love because, honestly, they were able to do it with nothing that we have. Nothing.
Absolutely.
I
mean, it's like the paints that they used on that pottery. I mean, it's 14,000 years old, and the paint's still there. Like, what did they use? There's so many questions that come up. Like, these people were able to build things that have lasted. I mean, we can't even build a house now that'll last more than 100 years before it has to be completely redone. But we got pyramids that are 20,000 years old. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just interesting when you look at things. And what you expose yourself to is really going to drastically affect your outlook and your inspiration. Like, I know a lot of people don't have the ability to walk through a museum on a regular basis, but at least once or twice a year, I either go to New York and I walk through the Met or MoMA, which is a Museum of Modern Art, or I go to DC and walk through the Smithsonian's. I got Philadelphia, which, if you guys aren't familiar with, they have a gallery there that is specifically for woodworking art, and I forget what it is called. It's the Center for wood Art and Wood, I think is what it's called. The Center for Art and Wood, and it's right in downtown Philadelphia. And I'm able to go there and see. And they don't just do wood turning; it's everything. But it's only wood. It's only woodworking, and they do demos and shows and stuff there. And I mean, this place is right in the heart of Philadelphia. And it's just good to go there and just see some of the things that are kind of that you normally wouldn't get to see. And seeing them in person is way better than seeing them in a picture. So I actually take time out of my life to go and visit these places and see these things, because there's nothing better than hands-on or just visually seeing it, and that's a big thing for me, and I've always been in the art world. I've always enjoyed it, seeing a Monet painting in person, there's nothing like it, so, stuff like that. That's just always been kind of my thing, and my wife, she's actually probably gotten me more into it than anybody else. She's like huge into art, so.
Wives are good at doing that. Making their husbands expand their horizons. My God, you're going to become more interesting whether you like it or not.
That's right.
No, I'm going backwards. Yeah.
Any other questions for Eli?
No, this has been a good interview.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of fun.
It has been. Makes me want to go out
So,
and
Eli,
challenge everyone.
we have a tradition on the
That's
show.
the best way to go.
A tradition on the show where we tell dad jokes towards the end of the show. I don't know if Rebecca told you this or not, so if you came prepared, that's fine.
Yeah, I'm aware. Well, I listen to your podcast, so
Oh.
I've listened to probably about half of your podcast, and I listen to them every chance that I get, but I read a lot of books also, and listen to audiobooks, read books, so I have to fit it in where I can, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I do listen to your show, and I'm probably about halfway through your content, so I'm familiar with the dad joke thing. I'm ready.
All right. He sounds excited, too. Well, since you're the guest, why don't you lead?
Okay, so how does Moses make his coffee?
How?
He brews it.
That's a good one. I've heard that before. That's a real good one.
Oh, Lord. All right, here's mine. Eyelashes are meant to prevent things from going into your eye, yet whenever I have something in my eye, it's always an eyelash. How ironic.
Oh.
Ooh. That one gets a groan. Oh.
Yeah, that's a groaner.
That's a groaner. You want to go next, Rebecca?
Yeah, I got one. I got arrested for illegally downloading the whole of Wikipedia. I told them I could explain everything.
Oh, that's pretty good. All right, I've got a bad
Citation
one.
needed.
I've got another groaner for you, Mike, that you'll like this one. Why do vampires seem sick? They're always coughing. I told you it was a groaner.
That's
And then I actually had one from a listener come in that I was going to give. CJ from CJ's Hobbies sent over a dad joke, and he says, a good 50% of elevator music. It's Wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. I just read his joke. Never mind. I'll have to reread it. We'll do it next week because I'm reading it off of his email, but it's not making. It made sense to me before the show, but now it doesn't make sense.
Is it something like half of elevator music is uplifting?
Yeah, maybe it is. Maybe it's missing a word. A good 50% of elevator music is uplifting. Yeah, that's what it is because there was no is there. Okay, sorry, CJ. I totally hacked your joke, but it was probably funnier when I screwed it up than it was when I told it. I think I just missed two letters. Is. Ah, yes. That's all I got.
Oh,
I got another one for you.
Eli's got another one.
Oh, he's
One
got two.
more. How do you make a Kleenex dance?
Yeah, I know this one.
You put a little boogie in it. That's all I got for today.
So a lot of the show has been about using the tools you have available to do the job that's in front of you, and some of those tools just make it easier for you to do that job that's in front of you. And Rebecca, do you have any tools like that make things easier for you to do?
Well, you know what? I do, actually. And I don't remember who was talking about this earlier, but it might have been Eli. It could have been Bob. I don't remember. But using those tools and starting out doing it the hard way, which is what I used to do with my carvings by holding a piece of sandpaper around a dowel and carving by sanding. But I don't have to do that anymore because I have saber-tooth burrs that you can find at sabertooth.com. And if you want to go on and get your own saber-tooth burrs superior carving tools, you could go to sabertooth.com, enter YMT at checkout, and save 10% off. And then you won't have to continue using your sandpaper wrapped dowel like I did for so many projects so many years ago. Yeah.
Boy, that had to be rough.
And, actually,
it's funny because I've done the same thing.
Yeah. Actually,
It was
you're money
rough.
ahead. I think you're money ahead if you buy the saber-tooth burrs and save the 10% because sandpaper's getting pretty expensive.
You know what?
So
it is.
long haul,
Yeah, it
and
is.
those
And
saber-tooth burrs last forever.
I have honestly never had a burr go bad.
Mm-hmm.
I have dropped them. I have lost them in the dirt. I have carved things I shouldn't have carved. And they have not gone bad. They're still going strong. In fact, I was just using some of them today and having a blast. Making a big dusty mess.
Maybe that should be a new tagline. Saber-tooth burrs, possibly indestructible.
I'll put them through the ringer.
Send them to me. I'll wear them. I'll make sure they come back in like 3 pieces. Actually, I have some that I've completely destroyed.
Really? Oh gosh, what are you
Oh, yeah.
carving?
Yeah, definitely. I've got some that are bad. They're really bad. Yeah.
Maybe I'm nicer to my tools than you are, Eli.
Maybe. I go through some tools. I'll tell you that. I can put a hurting on some tools. It's not necessarily that I'm using them wrong. It's just that I actually use them, and I use them hard. So
Yeah.
that's it. To give you an example, the angle grinders, the Makita grinders, I probably go through about 100 of those a year.
What?
That's not an understatement. It's probably about 100 of those a year. Yeah.
You mean
Absolutely.
the wheel, right?
No, I mean the grinder itself.
Angled?
I keep I keep 10 of them new in the box on the shelf at any given time.
That's like
Oh,
3.5
crap.
per day. Wait, no, every 3.5 days. I did my math totally.
Good
One
thing you're
every
an art
3.5
teacher.
days.
That's crazy. I know, I'm an art teacher, not a math teacher.
And it's not that I abuse them, but in the stone industry, I use angle grinders to cut stone, and the stone dust is very abrasive on the internals of those grinders. And so that's just an idea. I mean, I have roughly 100 routers, and I go through probably 3 or 4 routers a year, but I have roughly 100 of them. But that's industrial use. You know what I mean? And that kind of comes down to if I have hundreds of router bits. And if I'm making a Corian countertop, I don't want to have to take the router bit out of the router every time I need a new bit. So I have a router for each bit, if that makes sense, just for efficiency purposes.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
And some of the heavier bits, put a lot of strain on the routers. So if you use it a lot, eventually that router is going to burn up. So it's not that I abuse my tools, it's just that I use them in the manner that they were intended for, and I use them a lot. So I go through some tools.
I'll tell you what, after hearing that, I'm going out and buying stock in Makita.
And that's the brand that I use, actually, Makita. They're the best. The other ones just don't. The other ones, I burn out twice as fast. Yeah. So if you want a tool plug, Makita's angle grinders are where you want to be. They last. They can put up with a beating.
Yeah.
Makita, they last 3.5 days.
Or 3.5 per day if you're not a math.
According to the math.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that's funny.
So I know you mentioned it earlier, Eli, but would you like to go ahead and share your social media contacts again?
Yeah, absolutely. On Instagram, it's just Eli Polite. On Facebook, it's just Eli Polite. That's it. And I don't have any other social media accounts at this point. I am working on a website, but it's not there yet. And I do have an email address, and that's politegeneral@msn.com. And You can typically find me relatively easy on both those social media accounts, and I'm pretty quick about responding to messages that come in on either account. The best way, if you have wood turning questions, would probably be to message me on Instagram or on Facebook, because I check that way more than I check my emails.
Now we'll go from the simple to the complex. Rebecca.
Well, you can find me as Rebecca DeGroot on Facebook and YouTube, Rebecca_DeGroot on Instagram, my website, RebeccaDeGroot.com, Etsy and Redbubble, both Rebecca DeGroot Studio, but Etsy doesn't have spaces, while Redbubble does. And for whatever reason, Redbubble is never in the show notes. I need to add that.
No attitude at the end there?
Not this time.
Last week's show, it was Etsy and Redbubble, Rebecca DeGroot Studios, figure it out.
Because they're so confusing. I'm sick of talking about it. And you know what I just realized? I have a link. I do have a link on my website for my YouTube, my Facebook, and if you go into my shop section, I also have a link to my Etsy. So I don't know why I've been saying all of those all this time, because I just looked at it yesterday. And I'm like, wait a second.
I'm surprised you just don't say see the show notes.
I did forget that I do have a YouTube channel too, and that is EP Design 1. It's the number 1, not spelled out 1. It's just EP Design 1. That's it.
And Bob?
You can find me on YouTube and Instagram at RJB Woodturner, and you can find me on my shop vlog channel at What You Doing Bob. That's a YouTube channel.
Rebecca, you forgot. Rebecca's up to something.
Yeah, because I haven't been up to as much.
Yeah, she set that channel up, posted one video like 10 years ago, and that's
there's
it.
like 3, and it was from like 4 months ago.
4 months, 10 years. 2020 was a rough year. I'm way.
Yeah.
It was like 10 years.
It was. Hey, I did post a video on my other YouTube channel a while ago, and it's got like almost 500 views.
Wow.
Is that your slap video?
Wow.
Yes, it's my 27-second video.
I have quite a few on there, but I haven't posted one in probably about 8 months, and that's just because I've been building a shop. So they're going to be coming back soon, very soon.
I'm excited.
See, after I saw the name of that video, well, actually I just thought of it, but you should have had Barney Stinson and, what's the other character's name? Put their faces on those two characters. Yeah. Slapsgiving. Oh, and if anybody is interested at this point, you can find information about me at Lost for Pens on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and lostforpens.com. Again, I'd like to thank Eli for being our guest this week. It was much appreciated. Learned a lot about him and his process, and we definitely know how to pick his art out in a crowd. That's for sure.
Yes.
I know if I see his stuff, I can say that's an Eli Polite piece. I may not be able to say his name properly, but I know what your stuff looks
Everybody
like.
struggles with that name for some odd reason. It's Polite, whatever, so I'm used to it.
Yeah, try saying DeLauder.
That's how it's spelled. DeLauder.
There's only about 20 different ways to pronounce that one.
No, yeah, that's true. I guess I can't complain.
So, thank you everyone for tuning in this week. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, please share it with your friends, your enemies, your relatives. Let them know we exist.
Yeah.
We'd like to bump up our listener numbers if we can. And I just lost my train of thought again. Everybody have a great week. Stay safe. Test negative. And we'll see you next week. Bye.
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 See you later.
Bob out.
Bye.